remember that, right? Mm-hmm. The pillar of fire goes down and then the chariots is coming. And they going through. And Moses, raises his hand with a staff and the water just falls down on all the chariots. Greatest movie. I think that's the greatest movie I ever made. Amen. Turn to Exodus chapter 14. While you're there in Exodus, we're just going to see what happens here. Exodus chapter 14. What happens, because remember, the definition of a fan is a person that gets emotionally captivated by the external gifts and attributes. Are y'all with me tonight?
They like to sit back and watch the show.
They fell in love with what God did. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they fell in love with him.
Right.
See, there's many of us that have been that person back in Exodus chapter 3 that cried out to God. You might have been like myself, bound and just hurting, and needed God to come, and God came, but you were calling God and you were crying out to God to come give you relief. I wasn't calling God because I wanted God to come give me relief so I can follow him. I just wanted him to relieve my pain. I just wanted him to take care of my bills. I just wanted him to deliver me from my addiction. Or I just wanted him to deliver me from whatever we're here for tonight. I think that many of us can fall into that place or fall into that category where we initially cried out to God. And the only reason we cried out was for him to come deliver us from our pain. Why? Because we've grown up in atmospheres where we've become fans of God. We've fallen in love and become captivated with the things that he can do for us. Let's look at Exodus chapter 14, verse 31. Y'all there?
Yeah.
I'm going to start at verse 30. It says, "So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hands of the Egyptians, and saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses." We can even go and read this first verse in chapter 15. It says, "Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord, and spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider, he was thrown into the..." Man, they wrote a song about it. What they saw, and what they had experienced, and what they saw God do. But let's go to Exodus chapter 20. Because just only 6 chapters later, we see a reversal in what they're saying. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 19, it says, this is right after God gives the 10 Commandments. Okay? Right after he gives the law. And we see in verse 19, it says, "Then they said to Moses," let me read verse 18. "Now all the people witnessed the thunderings and the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, 'You speak to us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. See, one of the things about a fan that's different from a follower is a fan does not understand that love comes with correction.
Yes.
But see, a fan will love you as long as there's no real commitment, because one of the other things I want to point out about a fan, and this is really one critical thing that we just need to really ask ourselves even tonight. A fan never allows God to define the relationship. See, anybody ever been in a relationship where, there hadn't really been communication, but one person defined it, and, they were kind of like moving along a little more seriously than you? Or it might have been the other way around. You was feeling them, but they wasn't really feeling you. And you kind of thought y'all was boyfriend and girlfriend, and they ain't had no notice of that. Anybody ever been there? Well, this is one thing that a fan does. A fan defines the relationship. A fan never really allows God to say, well, this is what a relationship with me entails. In other words, if you want to have a relationship with me, this is what it's going to be predicated on, and this is what the relationship will be about. Yeah. As we see, we have fans, a fan base grew in Egypt when God came to rescue them. These are people like us that cried out to God, and God came and answered their cry. Yes. And God came and showed out, did many miraculous things. And they fell in love with the attributes and the gifts of God and the actual things that God was doing. But when it came to actually allowing God to come in and now govern them, fans do not want to be governed. Anybody, and see, one of the things about a fan is that also fans need miracles. See, one thing about a fan always demands an encore. Anybody ever been to a concert? And the person the artists come out there and they took you to a certain place and you were just captivated, and then they leave stage, but man, you demand more because you need an encore. They might not have, anybody, y'all laughing, but you go to concerts and they don't go through all the repertoire songs that you wanted them to go through. Mm-hmm. So you leave the concert just satisfied because they didn't come back out on stage and give an encore. Well, that's how we are. That's how a fan is with God. See, one of the things about, and I've said this many times, and maybe you said this as well. There's no way that I wouldn't follow God if I saw him part a seat. I mean, if I sat there, it ain't even got to be the sea. It could be the James. I can just go downtown, and if he part the James River, he got me. At least we think that. Yeah. But see, one of the things about miracles is that miracles were never meant to sustain us. A miracle is a supernatural phenomenon that comes to take us from one point of faith to another, but it was never meant to sustain us. That's why when you go to these churches and you go through these debt canceling seminars, and God he does something. He comes and does a miracle and pays your bills and debt cancellation, but you find these same people many times right back in the same predicament, needing God's hand again. And if God doesn't come, then now there's something wrong with the relationship. We saw it. You see the same thing. You don't have to turn, but in John chapter 6, there's a story of when Jesus is preaching. Because at the height of Jesus' popularity, this was also at the height of his opposition. He had, at the height of his greatest, when he had the most fans, it was also at the height of his greatest opposition. But on this one occasion in John chapter 6, he goes out and the people follow him and the people get hungry. Y'all remember that story? Mm-hmm. The people get hungry. And the disciples, they start talking amongst themselves. And one of the disciples points out the boy that has the fish and the loaves. And so what God does is God supernaturally creates a situation where everyone gets fed. Y'all remember that? But then now the people, they were so captivated by what he did, by the gift that he did with his hands, that they decided to camp overnight. But Jesus, I'm going to show him something totally different tomorrow. Because I'm going to be the only person on the menu. Because see, when God was the only person on the menu, when wasn't no more fish, he said, did you come for the fish? What do we do when there's no more fish and loaves? What do we do when God ain't miraculously canceling your debt no more? What do we do when you don't see the miracle happening in your marriage now? What happens when your kids is going wayward and you praying for God to do a miracle in my son and do a miracle in my daughter, do a miracle here, do a miracle there, and God is saying, no, I don't want a fan.
That's right.
What happens when he now comes to define the relationship?
All right.
Because what happens is that somewhere along the way, something got kind of mixed up in the relationship. And now he has to come to us and say this. Anyone that wishes to come after me must first die to himself, pick up his cross, and follow me.
Yes, yes.
There is a season, there is a period of time that I will allow you to be a fan.
Okay.
But at some point, you're going to have to let me come in and redefine the relationship.
All right.
He knows that there is a point. Because listen, many times we go to places where atmospheres are created for emotionalism. I ain't knocking nobody's church. I ain't knocking what people folks do. But I know that this happens. I know that atmospheres are created with music, and atmospheres are created with certain types of preaching and certain types of promises. That, well, God is going to do this and God is going to do that. But what happens when God says, look, I'm the only person on the menu now? There is no fish today. There are going to be no loaves today.